Hello, my name's Philippa Waller.
My name is Penelope Waller, and we are two of the directors at 4D Human Being.
And welcome to the 4D Human Being podcast. What's it all about, Pen?
It's all about your personal and professional relationships. It's about your communication skills, how you lead, how you work and build teams, how you are looking after yourself and your well-being, and how you are much more at choice. What do we mean by that?
Well, sometimes we can get a little caught in patterns in life, and we can all be a little bit on our automatic pilot. So 4D Human Being is all about helping us get back to choice and being a four-dimensional human being. And your fourth dimension, of course,
is intention. So whether it's about your impact, your leadership style, your team dynamics, whether it's about your well-being, whether it's about your communication or your presentation skills, anything that involves human beings interacting with other human beings, 4D Human Being are here to help.
we're going to take a deep dive and look at some tools, insights, theories that are going to help you go from a 3D human doing to a 4D human being, so that you can happen to the world rather than the world simply happening to you.
Recording. Well, hello, and on this beautiful sunny day.
Beautiful sunny spring day.
I've had a lot of these recently.
Yes. How are you doing?
I'm very good, actually.
Good.
I'm a little bit throaty, not ill, just a little bit of
You've had a lot on.
I have had a lot on.
A lot of travel.
A lot of travel.
Shopping.
Yes, a lot of Easter activities.
Yeah.
So I feel fine, although just, yes, slightly croaky voice, which...
Love
I
Easter.
quite enjoy a croaky voice.
Well, Mariella Fostrop
Yes.
is sort of top in one of the most appealing voices, and she's got that throaty croak.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's a very appealing sound.
This could be my window of opportunity.
Discuss.
I don't know for what.
Discuss.
So Easter.
Yes, love Easter. Opportunity to get together, see
Yeah.
friends. No crazy commercial build-up.
No, quite a lot of chocolate, not going to lie.
Yeah, but just love it. And also, we had the weather.
We had the weather.
UK.
Oh, it was so lovely.
Very, very lucky.
We had weather and lots of children. I had my daughter's friends staying over, and it was a lot of fun. We enjoyed the Minecraft movie, didn't we, Phil? Surprising.
I thought, well, as I've said to a few people, as we sat down in the cinema, it was such an intense education. And as the lights went down, I turned to your youngest and said, I quite literally have no idea what's about to happen, what's about to come. And she was laughing. She, what a ridiculous person who doesn't know Minecraft. Actually, and I thought, I'll just meditate for the next 90 minutes. This will be a good opportunity to use the world being noisy, but being able to switch off.
Yes.
Actually, I was engaged.
Very engaging.
It was engaged.
It was a good setup, wasn't it?
It was a good setup. It was engaging enough. I don't know how, but it was. And also the message
at
the
message.
end, which was
very sticky.
have the courage to go back out into the real world, because you can also create out there. And I was like, yes.
Well, do you know what I loved at the end?
Loved
it
that.
was much easier to destroy than create, but we must be creators. I was like, go Jack Black.
I thought
Or
there was
Steve, as his name was.
I thought there were some really, really solid messages there.
Loved it.
And the other thing I would say about that is, off the back of, can't believe I'm going to say this, chicken jockey madness.
And for anyone who doesn't know, that is a reference to a slightly
a reference to just like a moment in the film. For those of you who know, this will be an embarrassing explanation, but like a moment in the film, like a character or I'm going to say character. I've got no other word.
Something to do with trolls or baby trolls, or I don't know.
Yeah, there's a moment where literally there is a chicken jockey, but there were so many memes going around of people going to see the Minecraft movie, all ages, like quite grown up kids. Yeah. And when that gets mentioned, the moment in the film where chicken jockey happens, don't ask, and everybody throws popcorn up in the air, and in one cinema actually
had a live
chicken. Now, again, what I loved about that,
they did get thrown out.
They did get thrown out.
I thought it was quite fun.
What I found so reassuring is, with all of the tech, with all of the, amazing stuff that we've got, with gaming, with, everything that we have, those shared experiences are still important and also really sticky. That's what people were getting excited about. Being together in a cinema, all waiting for the moment where they could all jump up out of their seats together and throw popcorn together.
And there is so much creativity out there in the world. I mean, not only is Minecraft such a creative game, I mean, literally the whole purpose of it is building and creating. But the fact that, people took chickens into cinemas, and there is so much fun and creativity.
That's what I mean. It was really sort of life affirming.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah, very good. So
Back to work.
And we are going to be talking, I sort of want to say finally, because I think we've avoided this topic, which is sort of, I mean, not on purpose, but it's kind of interesting because
It's such a big topic.
so many of us avoid conflict and are conflict averse. And so we're going to talk about managing conflict. I mean, even that word, conflict.
Yeah.
So we're going to do 2 podcasts. That really isn't very much.
No, in fact, we keep talking about our 4D On Demand series that we're going to create for feedback and managing conflict.
So there will be.
And every day, when we talk about it, there are more and more things we want to put in that series.
Yeah, it's just like a behemoth that keeps growing, like an octopus with more
it really cuts to the fundamental core, doesn't it, of us as human beings, in terms of, fundamentally what causes a lot of problems in the world for us.
Yes, exactly.
Which is disagreement.
Yeah. So what do we mean by conflict? Really, we mean any conversations that feel difficult, conversations that we don't just go, oh, I can't wait to go and have that call, or, this is going to be brilliant, we're all going to be so happy. Any conversation really could be anything from a little bit of a disagreement to full out, I can't stand that person, I don't even want to be in the same room as them. And why is it important? Well, I would say a couple of things on that. One is, if you know that you've got the tools to deal with difficult conversations, your whole life is simply improved. The dial of well-being on your life just goes
100%.
up, because it's such a constant otherwise of either going to the polarity of people pleasing and sacrificing your own beliefs, or being in conflict all the time, being angry
or avoidant.
So it's daily.
Yeah.
And the other thing on that, which is so huge and we don't think about it, dogs are now he's sort of fighting with himself.
He loves your fluffy rug.
I've got a fluffy rug, and he's now having.
I might just put the video on him for a second. We can see him. He loves that rug.
Yeah. There we go. Very boy. That's not a conflict. That's joy. And sometimes it's not conflict, of course. It's just, it looks like conflict. But
that's a whole other thing, is when we don't need to step
when we don't need to step in, have conflict. Yeah. But so the other thing I want to say on it is something that we talk about a lot in therapy, which is rupture and repair. And if you're very conflict averse, there's a chance that you have not had modelled to you when you were growing up rupture and repair. And what we mean by that is that you have learned somewhere along the line that you can fall out or disagree. Maybe you could upset your parent, or they could upset you, and you could come back together and say sorry and repair the relationship. And if you've learned that, you have a much more solid foundation and trust in relationships. And if you haven't, it's really
the risk
tough.
is too high.
The risk is too high, because what you've learned is they don't repair.
Yeah.
You have to either please or you stay in conflict. But of course, when we learn rupture and repair, when we know that we can repair, we don't just get back to where we started. We gain more trust. Because if you're in a relationship, and you and I can definitely talk to this, where you know that you've come through difficult moments, you've got more trust in that relationship, because it's got more, it could hold more.
Exactly. And recognising as well when someone is trying to repair, and accepting it as well. I mean, there is definitely a skill set involved, and we can learn these skills. Not all of us learnt them as children. We might have learnt some of them, but not all of them. Depending on our upbringing, depending on the experiences we had at school with friends, we will possibly have learned some of these skills, not all of them. You can learn them. These are possible, and we're going to talk to some of those things today. I would say one thing as well that I think is really important. The word itself, as we know, can be quite challenging.
It's like networking, isn't it? They're words that can be quite pokey.
Yeah, and we use different words in the training that we do, candor, conflict, healthy conflict, challenge, these kind of words. Fundamentally, I think it's very interesting that we find that word so challenging, conflict. And I think something we should definitely talk about, whether on this podcast or the next one, is recognising when there is actually conflict that you need to step into, rather than perhaps there being some drama around something that you don't need to step into. So we'll also talk about that. But the word itself is very interesting.
Yeah, and I love the phrase, you don't have to turn up to every argument you're invited to. Yeah. Exactly. So today we're going to talk about conflict is inevitable. And the next podcast we're going to talk about conflict is an opportunity, and more in that space of like the friction that is really creative if we allow it some space and let it breathe a bit. So let's think about conflict. So I want to offer listeners, fill in the blank. If you ask yourself a question of, when I think of conflict, when I hear the word conflict, I ... Yeah. What does it mean to you? When I hear the word conflict, or if I know there's conflict on the horizon, I... Yeah. Run away, avoid, defend, get my argument ready, get battle ready, appease, buy gifts, compliment, apologise, bitch, gossip, talk to everybody else but that person. There's any number of things. So the first thing is to recognise, what are your patterns around conflict? And from that, you've got fairy boy all over you. Can you recognise...
What's your cuppies after your tea?
Have some tea, there we go.
He loves tea.
He loves tea, this dog. My
daughters tell me that dogs are lactose intolerant, so I'm not sure it's a good thing, but
No, this has got lactose-free milk and he's fine. There we go.
Love a cup, don't you?
Love it. Can you recognise where those patterns came from? Because, importantly, what that can do right from the start is shift you from a sense of either I've got to win, or I'm rubbish, I should be better at conflict, to simply objectively, that's why I have responses like that to conflict. That makes sense. That's what I learned. It's like I went to a certain conflict school. This is what I learned, and that's why I respond now. And being able to do that can just shift us into, actually, it's not about fault. It's not about blame. It's not about incompetence or ineptitude or fear. It's about what we've learned.
Exactly. And those things that we've learned very often, and we say this a lot in psychology and psychotherapy, those patterns that we've learned have served us very well. So, as an example...
They've helped us survive.
So, perhaps as an example, if you are a conflict avoider, it might be that in your younger life at school or at home, it was safer for you to avoid conflict for whatever reason. So those patterns are there for a very, very good reason. Why do we think that it's important to understand those and perhaps change some of them if they're not working for you? Well, I guess I would go back to one of the fundamental things that we often say in this work, which is there's kind of three ways to live your life. The world is happening, you don't like it. So someone's got an opinion that you find abhorrent, or somebody does something that you don't like, or whatever it might be. Your three choices are you fight back. Mm-hmm. Your second choice is you kind of feel crushed, victimised, you stay quiet, you just accept. Or the third one is that you change something in yourself. You have a conversation, you change your own behaviour. Now, lots of us do spend time in those first two patterns of behaviour. And like I said before, those patterns are there for a very good reason. They have helped us survive, stay safe. And they ultimately cause psychological pain for us.
Yeah, they're keeping us stuck at this point.
They're keeping us stuck.
Because our options are not any broader than that.
Exactly.
They're only as narrow as we've learned.
Exactly.
And this is an opportunity to expand your range, because we're not saying never go for the fight, because sometimes you've got to stand up and fight for your beliefs, but you want more options. You want choice, which is always what we talk about.
And ultimately, lots of the people we speak to, lots of the people we coach, and lots of you out there listening will know this, you'll reach a point in your life where things will feel a bit intolerable, and maybe a relationship will break down, or you won't want to work with that person anymore, or whatever it might be. And for us, exactly as you said, Phil, it's just some of those patterns will no longer work for us. And that's where we have the choice of, we can either be in one of those two initial pain points, or we can make a change and have more choice.
Absolutely. And I want to build on that to those pain points where we find ourselves saying things like, why is everyone so horrible?
Yes, I would never do that.
I would have. Why is everyone so difficult? I always end up working with difficult people, or working for, or my bosses are always so difficult, or no one ever listens. And if you find yourself in these really broad statements, actually, this is about pattern. Because if we turn the mirror back to ourselves, what it's telling us is, I find any level of challenge difficult, and therefore I have to make everybody else difficult. Now, again, I want to go back to my first point. This is only what we've learned. Be really compassionate to yourself. Self-compassion is the key to so much of the development requirements of us human beings at the moment, from getting out of victimhood to getting out of anger and resentment. If we can be self-compassionate and go, okay, this is why, this is how I tend to respond. It's been useful enough. It's got me this far. But it cannot be true that all men of a certain age are difficult, or all women are difficult to work with, or all young people are difficult to work with, or whatever, whatever these broad statements are. When we're in the always and never, we know that it can't be true. Yeah. Exactly. So I've been sitting here looking at my lovely twin and thinking, of course, one of the things that we can just shift with the idea of conflict is two things. One, is there an underlying assumption somewhere that everyone should be the same?
Yeah, totally.
That we should all think the same, have the same ideas, have the same process in mind, have the same way forward, same way of working together, same attitude. And if they're not the same as us and as we expect, then there's a problem.
Well, two main phrases come to mind for me with this. And not to say I haven't said these 1,000 times, but particularly in personal relationships. If you've ever said, why can't you just ...
Why can't you? I mean, I've been there.
Or if you've ever said, I would never ... Those two phrases are like the big sort of alert red flags that you are in a space where you are finding it very difficult to accept that somebody else is not behaving in the way you would want them to behave, or the way that you yourself behave.
Yeah.
So we then cascade into you should.
Yeah.
And that's very tricky.
And that is,
if someone says that to us, I mean, it's infuriating.
Exactly. I would never. And actually, that is the beginning of the work, of course, because while most of us, when we think about managing conflict, we want to jump to, right, what do I need to say? What do I need to do? Let's get to the actual conversation. Actually, we need to start with ourselves. We need to hold the mirror up and go, okay, when have I ever behaved like this? Or what's my part? Not in the solution yet, but what is my part in the conflict, in the difference?
Yeah, we've spoken about this, haven't we, with relationships, in as much as this can feel very difficult to accept. And I'm going to say it anyway. We are co-creating our relationships. Mm-hmm. So
this is tough.
If you have a difficult relationship with somebody, but you notice that either they go on to have a very different relationship with somebody else, or perhaps in the workplace you notice that they have different relationships with colleagues, we have to accept that we have co-created that relationship with them. So, if I think about myself as an example, I know that my boundaries can be a little bit porous. So I know, for example, that I'm more likely to overstretch my boundaries in order to help people to be happy or help them do what they need to do. Like, for example, this morning, I was in a rush. I had quite a lot of work to do, but no, I took 20 minutes to help my daughter with a piece of homework that she probably could have done on her own. But I'm more likely to do that and try and be helpful. Now, that, in a way, is very nice, and I'm trying to be nice to people. That's great. But then I have to accept that if I've co-created a relationship with somebody where they step over my boundaries, I have a part in that because of how I step in. And perhaps a relationship they have with somebody else, those boundaries are much clearer. So it can be really difficult, particularly when we think we're being nice, to hold that mirror up and go, well, there is something I'm doing in co-creating this.
And that's so beautifully put. There's a phrase that I think is really important with conflict, because it can feel clear that the other person is the difficult one. Yeah. Because you're trying to appease. Yeah. So that you're absolutely right. Then the question is, what am I tolerating here? Because as someone said to me a few years ago, which I really loved, you get what you tolerate. And that give, exactly as you say. And it's tough because it's so tempting to say, yeah, but I'm the nice one trying to give. But it is a contributor. It's a contributor to the relationship. And if we go back to that lovely equation that we love, you've got to do 100% of yourself and 50% of the relationship. And if somebody is push, that 50% of boundary is important. It's yours. Now, that might feel unfair. Yeah. Why can't they just? Why don't they respect my boundaries? That's when we're caught in those patterns.
Yes.
Of life's not fair, they should. we can't do anything about it. We've got to start with
Totally. And of course, the flip side of that is, once we've held the mirror up to ourselves and recognised some patterns about ourselves, of course, we also have to understand that even if we find the other person annoying, challenging, unreasonable, whatever it might be, of course, they too have their patterns and are behaving rationally based on what they have learnt about relationships and what they need and what keeps them safe. Now, we may find some of that behaviour unacceptable. We have to bear in mind when we're creating assumptions about situations, both parties are very likely operating rationally and behaving in a way that they have learnt works quite well for them.
Right, that's exactly right. And actually, I'm going to really challenge, and I stand with everybody who finds this challenging, that if we think about personal development, it's at a very young age, really baby age to toddler, infant age, where we expect the world to bend to us.
Yes.
And once we start going to school, we start just into that 3, 4, 5, that's when we start to learn, there's all these other people, there's different ways of being. That's why we have rules to try to all work together. But
so we're moving out of the egocentric.
We're moving out of the egocentric. So actually, the first thing is to catch ourselves and to just acknowledge, I want the world to bend to me, because it's a young result. And that's what I'm saying. It's not human. We're all human. Wouldn't it be nice if, the world was just, full of marvellous things that just suited us? But it's not. The one other thing that I want to mention before we look at how can we step into those conversations is also the second kind of fundamental piece around expecting everybody to like us. So that the liking,
or wanting everyone
to like us, and actually, that can definitely get us into sticky territory if we're an appeaser, if we're a people pleaser, because we'll end up bending over backwards because we want people to like us. Taking the personal sometimes out of conversations, particularly with work colleagues. Yes, of course, it's nicer when there's liking in there, and it's also very useful. And we want to be thinking about the issue sometimes, not the personal relationship. Yes, we want the relationship to be constructive and we want it to be collaborative.
But what's more important?
But taking it personally, if they don't like me and agree with me, I can't work with them. That isn't true. Actually, sometimes we need that friction in relationships to have a really good creativity. So just check again whether or not liking is at the top of your list, and that means that anything below that just isn't getting the attention, because if you don't like them or they don't like you, it's unworkable. Because actually that doesn't have to be true necessarily.
Well, it's really interesting, Phil, and I know we're sort of jumping around a bit here, but this is why we have so many conversations about this, because there's so much we can talk about, which is, perhaps in life we have this ideal of being in equilibrium in terms of our emotional state, and that's where we feel good and nice, and there's probably a truth to that, and that lots of us have learned that we've got to, as quickly as possible, move through and get out of disequilibrium. And if we can learn to sort of sit in it
absolutely
a little bit,
absolutely.
I mean, it's not always pleasant, but gosh, it's a game changer.
It's a game changer. I mean, we've talked about the window of tolerance before. Is your window of tolerance small, which means you either shut down or go up and out of the window of tolerance into hyperactivation. So hyperactivation is into that anxiety or anger. I mean, I'm being very brief about this. And hypo is when you drop out and you flatline. And we've all got different sized windows, and the more we can grow that window and learn to tolerate conflict, then the better equipped we are.
And there's something that's a bit more interesting about life. I was telling you that I was watching the very old version of Pride and Prejudice the other day. It's 30 years old now, with Colin Firth and Jennifer.
Don't tell me that. That's horrific.
It did look a little bit dated, but I absolutely loved it. Anyway, the reason I mention it is because I definitely, if I think about what I said earlier on this podcast, I'm definitely somebody who would probably try to resolve conflict quite quickly. But of course, back in the day, when all we had was letter writing, And, you know, if people even went into sort of 2 counties away, you weren't going to see them for months, of course. They really did have to sit with, tolerate.
Yeah.
You know,
But between letters.
yeah, so when Lizzie and Darcy, so when he first asked her to marry him and she said no, and it was quite a confrontational conversation, of course, that just hung with them for months, actually.
It's true.
And
you get on with life.
so interesting. I was watching it. I thought it was quite sort of tantalising, quite intriguing that there was this kind of conflict between them. Of course, in reality, now we'd be texting trying to resolve it. But I quite like the fact that it kind of just hung there. It's nice.
Yeah,
really nice.
yeah. It's
tantalising.
Very interesting. But I do think that we are less able to sit with those difficult feelings now. And look, so going back to what you said, almost like we shouldn't feel them.
Yeah.
And actually there's something in this about when conflict arises, really normalising that. You know, at a really fundamental level, you've got atoms pinging off each other. We're the same. It's energy, isn't it, that's hitting each other, and it's not always comfortable. Yeah. Like, that's normal. Okay, let's go to the 4D model and start with, let's say you've got something going on, a difficult conversation that you know you need to have, or a difficult relationship. First thing that I would say, well, first 2 things. Turn to yourself and help yourself get your nervous system regulated. So one of the things we talk a lot about is story follows state. That when you're activated, when your nervous system is activated, it's going to be very difficult to get to the second point in your foundational approach to difficult conversations, which is to get emotion out of the driver's seat, get them in the back seat, and get intention driving. And that is tough when your nervous system is activated. Yeah. So all the time that you are churning over, ruminating, churning over those thoughts, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Why have they done this? Coming up with all the arguments, all the reasons. The more you're activating yourself, the more emotion is driving the bus, and the more that the idea of having that conversation is coming from a place of
anger, resentment,
anxiety. So already we're starting from a place of this is going to be an argument.
Right. I'm going in.
I've got my weapons. I'm ready. So the very first thing to do is do the breathing, get yourself regulated, take charge of the conflict that's inside of you first.
Yeah.
And now ask yourself, what do you really want from this? If you've got a project that you're working on with somebody else and they've got an idea that's different from yours, now you can go in and you can fight about that idea. But what really do you want underneath that? Do you want this product that you're developing to be the best possible product for, you know, dentists all over the world to make their lives easier?
Yeah.
Do you want
to increase your market share?
Do you want this process to be much more streamlined and efficient? Like, what is really wanting here? Because there's so many paths to get there that you're stuck on the next brick that you want to put down on the path, and you've lost sight of the path and the goal. So really get back to purpose, take a breath, and now we can open up to, okay, well, let's see what options we've got to get.
That might take some time. You know, as we often say in the work that we do, we can be very focused on the thing that needs to be resolved or the thing that needs to be agreed on. Exactly as you said, we're not just looking at the next brick, we're looking at the 100 bricks in front of us. We want to get there because we can see very clearly where we need to go. And exactly as you've said, sometimes we just need to move the emotional self out of the driver's seat. Now, that can be easy if we can quickly get back to intention, but sometimes it's not easy. And it might take some time, and it might mean that it's not one conversation, it's 5 conversations.
Right.
It might mean it's not today, it's next week. So sometimes taking time out, labelling the emotions, just acknowledging how you're both feeling might be the way to go. And then don't have the conversation on the same day.
100%.
And I think that's so often something that we do. We think, well, I've got to get there, so I've got to solve it. And we, for whatever reason, we cannot get the emotional self out of the driving seat, but we plough on anyway.
Yeah, and actually just to acknowledge that and say whether it's to yourself or whether you feel you can have the conversation with someone, say, I'm finding this really difficult. It's taking up quite a lot of my brain space at the moment. I wonder if we can take a breather, take a pause, or whether we can just acknowledge that this has got to a place that's not easy.
Yeah.
Let's not have the conversation today. I'm wondering if you're feeling the same. Yes, I am. Okay, great. Let's pick this up
That's
next
already
week.
done something for the relationship.
It's already just released that tension valve. It's like letting air out of a tyre, isn't it? Just like, okay, they feel the same. They're not sitting there, drinking margaritas going, I don't care, I'm having a great time. They're feeling it as well.
It's so interesting when I have conversations with clients around this. And again, it probably relates back to what we've learnt when we're younger, that often we don't consider or think that we are entitled to ask for the time or the space or the acknowledgement of how we feel. I think sometimes we feel like, well, it's not within my ask, or it's not reasonable to ask for that. And of course, it's perfectly reasonable for you to take care of yourself and your needs.
Yes, absolutely. Just exactly.
A quick word from us at 4D Human Being. If you're enjoying the show, please do click follow so that you can have the 4D Human Being podcast instantly in your feed. And we'd love it if you liked and reviewed us. Let us know what you think. Please do think of one or two people that you could share the 4D Human Being podcast with. Somebody who would really benefit from the content you're listening to right now. Back to the show.
Acknowledge that. And also you are, if you take this approach and you start with acknowledging this is what I'm feeling, and we'll move on to some other stages, it's like the difference between sort of, I'm just going to do it myself, and actually taking the time to coach somebody, because you are building for the future.
Yeah.
If you do this on this one conversation, you've now shown each other in that difficult relationship, we can do this and we know how to do it, rather than we're going to have a fight every time. And the second thing I would say on that, there's something very important exactly about acknowledging some of the feelings and maybe finding out if someone else is struggling. And that's all. The second thing might be to go into a conversation simply to listen. Because all of that ruminating, we're getting our weapons ready to go in with the solution, we're missing a really important stage, which is what most of us need when we're feeling upset or anxious, is to be heard.
Yes.
If our idea is not on the table, or we're trying to get it on the table and that's what's annoying you, then it might be that person just needs some space to be heard, to say, this is why I think this is really important. This is what I think is really good about this. And it might be that once they've been heard, they feel on a level playing field.
Yeah.
They feel less victims.
Totally. And again, I would go back to, it doesn't all have to happen in one conversation. So the first conversation might be that I don't know if you can hear my dog crying there. I mean, he's literally trying to get into my seat. Gonna lean over, look at him. And then, the first conversation might literally be, I'm here, I've got half an hour, I'm going to listen to you. And, one phrase that can really be a game changer is, help me understand.
Yes.
Or describe to me what's going on for you.
Yes.
You could literally say one thing at the beginning of a conversation, hear them out. And you might be even though in your head you're thinking, but I don't agree with what you're saying.
Yes, and I've already got the solution.
Yes. If you can just not go there and let them be heard, my goodness, their emotional state at the next conversation is going to be completely different.
Yeah, 100%. So 100%.
Yeah.
So,
and they can also feel a bit unfair because you're sitting there listening and you're thinking, but they're not listening to how I feel. But again, if we can change something in our own pattern, we can really change the game in terms of what that conversation will ultimately be like.
Yes, and in that conversation, catch yourself wanting to jump in and disagree, take a breath and ask for more.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? I'm really hearing that. Reflect back to them. So what you're saying is, you're going to give everybody such a win.
Well, also it's so much easier as well.
It's so much easier. You haven't got to come up with the answers.
No.
Just listen.
Yeah.
You've now put a lot of glue into the relationship, because now that person feels heard. Now, they might have been expecting an argument. What they've had is, tell me more. Okay, yes, I really hear that. Yeah, tell me more. Pick up your lovely dog.
I've got to bring the dog.
Bring the dog in. And that's not what they're expecting. So already you've taken some of the heat out of their sales, to mix my metaphors, which is going to hot sales. That's going to be in the podcast description, isn't it? So I want to now add to this. So let's say we've heard. Okay, great. At any point during this might be your next stage. You might now set the intention between you. So let's really have the conversation about what we do and don't agree with. Let's say you've done it the other way around. You've asked to be heard yourself. You've both listened to each other. Set the intention. So there's a very different intention to, my intention here is to beat down your ideas and make sure I win this argument. And
let you know that I'm right.
And let you know I'm right, and that you never, ever disagree with me again. That's my intention. Or my intention is that we get to a really good solution that's going to work for everybody here. Or that we get to a place where we really feel like we can work together again. Or my intention here really is to take care of the team within this project. That's what I'm really feeling here, because it might not even be about the idea. It might be about something else. So set your intention, and that is going to be at least one layer below I want my idea to win, or whatever it is. So set your intention, because again, once you've got that between you, that's already a very different conversation to we're in a boxing ring and we're about to beat each other up.
I hope you're not yawning at our podcast, Bear. Well, the other thing I would say about that, setting the intention, is occasionally it might be that if you take those 5 minutes to really think about, as you say, the true intention that sits beneath, occasionally you may come to the conclusion actually that you don't actually need to have a conversation. Very often I ask clients, is that person's behaviour or choices or opinions, are they stopping you from doing the work that you need to do in the way that you want to do it? And sometimes the answer will be no.
Yeah.
Actually,
I can get this need met without us necessarily agreeing.
I can serve the underlying intention actually without going into a difficult, conflictual conversation. And that would suggest to me that there's probably something else at play. There's some drama going on that's been created that isn't actually sitting at the core of what you're doing. Now, not to say that that's always the case. Sometimes we'll come to that core intention and we'll still need to have a challenging conversation. But sometimes you may recognise that actually the argument or the conversation that you were planning to have has got really nothing to do with the underlying job at hand.
Exactly. Just because you find their way of working irritating, you can still get to where you need to get to, or certainly 90% or whatever. And the other thing I'd say on that is we so often assume that they know what the problem is. So sometimes you just need to tell them the effect of what's happening on yourself or on them or on other people and colleagues. So when
objectively rather than you're really
to let you know, when you send emails at 10 o'clock at night to the rest of the team, they really feel under pressure because they have a high respect for you. They feel under pressure to respond at that time. I cannot tell you how many times I've had this conversation, and I really get it as somebody whose brain can be busy at very odd hours of the day. that you want to get that idea out there, so you send an email.
And your intention is good.
Your intention is simply to get that
I've got an idea.
I've got an idea and I just want to get that out of my head and into the system. No expectation that someone's got to action that at 10 o'clock at night. But the impact is different. That's not necessarily how people feel. Yeah. So again, it might be that you state the effect of someone's behaviour, the impact of someone's behaviour, and they might actually say, oh my goodness, okay, I'll put them in save drafts. Yeah, and there's a really simple solution to that.
That's
exactly.
Right. That's right.
And there's a maturity piece on that it's all very well talking about intention, but we also need to take responsibility for our impact.
Yeah, totally.
That if someone says to you, because if you're on the receiving end of what we've just said, if you're on the receiving end of someone saying the impact of when you do that is this, and you say, wow, that's not my intention.
That's not what I meant.
It's not what I meant at all. I just meant to. But that's not the point. The mature level of this is to both acknowledge the intention and to take responsibility for your own impact. So that's another piece.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to give some tips. There's so much that we could say about this, and there's a huge topic, and we've got the drama triangle. It's an enormous topic, and we will be releasing a digital series on 4D on demand sometime.
We've got to try and contain the beast.
Yeah, contain the beast, and just make it really, really practical.
Yeah.
So there's a number of things that we've already said. I want to add a few tips in here. One of them is language, which I'm going to pass to you.
Yes, so language. So there's loads of things that we could say on language when we think about challenging conversations and conflict. So many things we could say. One thing I would say that we talk about time and time again, both in feedback and challenging conversations, is what we call the integral map or the multi-perspective map.
Sounds very grand.
It sounds very grand. I know, it is very grand. Well, it's not anything that people don't know. It's just... It's the pronouns, effectively, that we get caught in when we're in these conversations. Because, of course, we are very often in these conversations subjectively, because we have our feelings, our opinions, our experience of that person, the situation, et cetera, et cetera. So we will sometimes get caught in the I and the you. So if you think about a 4-quadrant grid of pronouns, you've got the I, the you, the we, and the it. We can get caught in you did, you should, I feel,
I'm right, you're wrong.
So there we are. We've got these two kind of polar positions. Now, it's not to say that sometimes those pronouns are not valid. They very much are. And we are often much better off, going back to intention as well, we're often much better off moving as quickly as we can into either the we language or the it language. And what do we mean by that? So the we language will be something collective that you want. So it could be, what's the best way for us to move forward? How can we think about this differently? If you're in the we space, there's no finger pointing. It's quite difficult for the other person not to respond in the similar space. Even if they do keep responding a little bit with the I and the you, eventually, if you keep using the we, they'll probably be forced to go there too. The other piece, of course, is the it, which is wonderful when you're dealing with a challenge, a problem, a situation. Because, of course, if you can put the it as a sort of an external objective thing that you're both looking at. Think about a triangle and that you two are sitting on sort of 2 points of the triangle. The issue is on the third point of the triangle. So it's not sitting with either of you. It's not personal. There's a thing there that needs to be resolved and you're both looking at it. So if you can sort of objectify the it and put it outside of yourselves, again, that will completely change the language that you use and how you're each feeling about the situation. So lots of things we could talk about language. One of my favourites is the integral multi-perspective map. Get out of the I and the you, get into the we and the it.
And I'm going to build on that with the second tip to end on, which is the physical, the geography of the space. So when we think about the it that you've just mentioned, if you're online, this is tougher. I would argue that if you can have conversations in person, if they're very difficult conversations, better. Definitely get off email. I mean, we haven't said that already. My goodness, get off email. The pinging back and forth.
And then copying people in.
And copying people in or taking people off copy on email. If you've got 2 or 3 back and forths and you're getting into a difficult conversation, pick up the phone.
Totally.
I mean, you are only going to make it worse if you keep going back and forth on email.
In fact, I would offer, if you are the recipient of an email that's a bit challenging, don't even reply.
Don't reply. Pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. The tone of the voice, hearing another human being at the other end of the line, whether it's on video call or phone, it's going to dissipate so much of your problem on email. Yeah. It's so impersonal on email that it's just an argument. So if you can meet in person, and if you've got to a place where you're trying to, resolve an issue, as Penelope said, think about the it. Literally get a flip chart or a piece of paper, sit with the other person shoulder to shoulder, not opposite each other on a table, because that's like the battlefield has been drawn up. The medieval armies are coming towards each other. Sit next to each other, looking at the thing, be it a screen, be it a flip chart, be it a notepad. Look at the thing.
Difficult for your brain to think you are in conflict. If you are sitting shoulder to shoulder and looking at something else, your brain will just not recognise that as conflict.
Think of historically, we are you and I are now together in a team
on the medieval battlefield.
Exactly. So. If you can.
I don't think we have traditional views of ourselves had we lived in past history.
So it's that Boudica advertising myself. Okay, 2 more tips. Look for the safety cues. So when you're in conflict, we can often lose sight of what does work about this relationship. What do I like about them? What are they in agreement with? What ideas can we share?
How are they trying to be collaborative?
Exactly. Look for the safety cues. There will be some. Finally, palms open and closed. So notice your body language. Notice what happens. Fold the arms, jaw lock, tense fists clenched, shoulders locked.
Eye contact can often go as well.
Eye contact can go. So your body is a really, really great portal into diffusing some of that conflict, sort of driven language and attitude. And one of the amazing things we can do is to very softly open our palms out, face up and open. When we soften our palms about waist height and open them out, your body signals are now screaming to your brain, we come in peace, we're fine.
Totally. And the impression that you're giving to the other person. So as an example, if you were to say a simple phrase such as, I don't know why you're saying this. If you have your hands kind of out with palms down, I don't know why you're saying this, versus if you have your palms up, I don't know why you're saying this. That will be interpreted totally differently. And your body will feel differently, and the person sitting opposite you will feel differently as well.
And you could do it even exactly really basic. I can see we're in disagreement here with palms pushing away or palms open. I can see we're in disagreement here. There's an invitation.
The voice will change as well because your brain's getting different signals.
Exactly. So it's incredible. Palms open and closed. That could get you out of all sorts of sticky situations.
So true.
So that's our first podcast on managing conflict. I feel like we sort of stuffed the Christmas stocking there.
But we know we've only just touched the surface of everything that we want to talk about.
Just try to give you as much as possible, but there's so much to look at, and like I say, we will be laying everything out in a fabulous series to give you loads of insights and tools and tips into managing conflict, because it is such a game changer. And actually game changing is the right word, because if you're in ongoing conflict with someone, they are expecting the game to continue 100%. As it is. So take some of these tips, change the game, and you'll change your life.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the 4D Human Being podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Do take on board some of the insights, tools and tips, because every time that you try something new to get back to choice, you are making a vote for the you that you want to become. And I love that phrase, Pen.
I do too. And please do share this episode with somebody that you know would really benefit from the lessons and learnings we've been chatting about today.
And of course, if you're interested in more from 4D Human Being, do get in touch. We run workshops, trainings, online, in-person, conference events and keynotes. We've got the 4D On Demand platform for your whole organisation. And we do have a free Essentials membership where anybody can sign up for absolutely free to access some of our insights, tools and tips. So do get in touch with us if you'd like to hear more. We cannot wait to hear from you and to carry on the conversation.